Evans, thank you very much, and thank you to my senior. I haven't seen him in a bit now. And good morning to viewers and listeners on the radio. I was looking for a doctor. I think I'll find it. You see, the NDC's conversation on this subject is welcome, and I think that ordinarily we should engage to see that public institutions are being very prudent in terms of their utilization of whatever power we've given them and the resources that is available for them to spend on those ventures. But we who are in the space to engage the subject matter must also be circumspect. And on the particular issue, and I think you're letting us focus on the headquarters building alone. That's really what you're having us do. It's a subject matter that I think that the NDC must be very much aware. Most particularly the former Deputy Minister for Finance, Atu Forson, because he was a member of the board when the Bank of Ghana board, at the point when they were in government. And this conversation about building a new headquarters for the Bank of Ghana didn't start today. It's a conversation that started way back in the 90s, where the Bank of Ghana decided or had an idea to build a whole new place because where they were staying, where their current location has been caught up with development. So the discussion to build a new headquarters started way back. And I mentioned Mr. Atu Forson because he was part of the board that was looking for a parcel of land to buy for this particular purpose when he was there as a board member of Bank of Ghana. To the extent that there was a company or an individual that brought them or showed them a parcel of land near the Achimota Forest. And I'm singling out when he was part of the Bank of Ghana board. And the individual was offering that piece of land for 2.5 million per acre. Dr. Atu Forson was part of the board. So it has been an ongoing conversation, and they committed to buying that 20-acre land at $2.5 million an acre. And their commitment, they were committed, the board actually issued a directive for them to proceed in negotiation.
Did they actually buy them?
So it got to a point they had to pull out. And in pulling out, there was a settlement cost of 1.2 million paid to the individual.
But bottom line, they didn't go ahead with
But I'm telling you that it's a financial loss that is occasioned just by the interest. Now, even that is not my focus, right? My interest here is that the conversation to build that headquarters.
But from
hold on.
But from what I understand, the government then actually rejected the idea of buying the land at that time because of the cost involved. When it was first moved.
Yeah, and that is not even the first time.
Because he was a government rep on it, he would have led the opposition to the purchase.
No, that's not even the subject matter. The idea is that the conversation of building that precedes this governor, and it started way back in the 90s. And I can go through a chronology of efforts. There have been about 3 different procurement processes to get a land.
But you are actually spending.
Hold on.
So that
But Evans, you should understand this, that there is an understanding by the Bank of Ghana that predates those who are in office now, a commitment to build a new place.
But if that's true, then considering that, I'm just put it in context.
Yeah,
the NDC2 also had their own economic challenges in 2013, 14, 15.
Right.
They could have built it.
Hold on.
If
that's not a
the plan was there before.
That is not a material point. The material point is that.
But they chose not to.
Hold on. It's not as if they chose not to. They just haven't gotten the land where they want to build it. Right? So had the agreement, the board issued a directive that pursued this 20-acre land near the Achimota Forest, and they took step. Atu Forson was part of that board, and they took step to purchase it. Okay, and part of some due diligence which had happened in the previous procurement processes prevented it from going on. But in this exceptional case with Atu Forson on the board, there was a damage that he had to pay to the person who was offering the land to sell. About $1.2 million was lost to Ghanaians. Now, that is to paint a picture to say that the building of the Bank of Ghana was not something that started yesterday, in which case, 2021, in which case you would say that, why would they, out of the blue, start building Bank of Ghana headquarters?
The question is about if what you're saying is a fact, that it didn't start now, it predated your government, it predated the NDC's last government. Why spend the money now? Why start to 2021 when, especially with that economic condition that we were facing at the time, why spend it now? Why don't postpone it till later?
But you made a point that in 2015, thereabouts, the NDC was in IMF.
Yeah.
And the reason they stopped, they couldn't build it is not because they thought that we had an economic crisis, right? But they didn't get it, they didn't build it because they couldn't resolve the land. And under this administration, I think in 2021 or so, they were able to procure land through a government instrument. So they were not going to pay $50 million for 20
But Richard, this is a simple man in the street question to you. You're saying that you inherited a plan to build.
Yeah.
2021, height of our economic crisis, right? I mean, getting the COVID was telling us everything was going to go haywire into the economy. You're saying to the ordinary person, at that time, when you're coming out of COVID was, you're about to leave and COVID was telling you the economy was going to collapse and you're in crisis, is the right time to spend $250 million
Evans,
on an office building?
Evans, I can't answer that question for you. But the point I was trying...
No, it's a simple question.
No.
Was that the right time to do... Consider you inherited the plan.
Listen.
Was that the right time to spend the amount of money on an office block?
I am not the board of Bank of Ghana. If you're asking my personal opinion, I don't think it matters. But I'm trying to illustrate...
So you don't think it matters they're spending $250 million?
I'm saying that if you're asking my personal opinion, I don't think it matters. I'm not the board. Whatever informs the decision. But I'm trying to illustrate for you a narrative that gives you an impression of a project that the bank has to undertake that dates back into the 90s, that we need to build a new headquarters for us, which project the Bank of Ghana has been pursuing up until a point. Right? So if you look from the 90s...
Up until the point where
they actually got the land.
But also up until a point where we're facing our worst economic crisis in the generation.
No. See, if you begin to argue along those lines, then you're actually nitpicking. Because really, in 2015, when the NDC had that challenge with the IMF, they were still proceeding with getting the land anyway. The only thing that stopped perhaps them going ahead to build it was how the acquisition of the land didn't go through.
So stay with me. Let's quickly
let me just conclude for you. I just wish that you allow me to flow.
On the building, because that's not the substantive matter. I wanted to clear that.
Just allow me just to flow, because the interruption is too much. The point I am making is that...
On the building?
Yes, on the building, to say that the bank has a project to build.
Yeah, but you've made that point.
That point is significant. That's the only point to make.
Yeah.
For you to understand that, they didn't just wake up yesterday and say, now we have arrived, we want to get a land, we want to build. It's an institutional decision to move. And so that movement, every leadership that came was committed to getting that dream realized. So this Bank of Ghana leadership was pursuing what legacy project or legacy initiative for the bank they inherited, and they pursued it. If any case at all, this government, this governor or this leadership actually succeeded in getting a land for the Bank of Ghana to be able to start the process, which is something that they inherited. Okay. So we need to put it in context. Now, currently, if we look at a situation we're in and we say that it's not acceptable, we should move on, that is contingent upon the present analysis that we'll make. But the question to you is that had we not incurred this 53.1 billion debt, would we be having this conversation?
Okay, stay with me.
Hold on. You asked me a question about a board decision to invest in a project.
At the time of economic crisis.
Yes, and that project we're talking about. And you asked my opinion, and I said my personal opinion would not matter because there's a decision already taken.
Okay, so
if they are the point of making the decision,
so your opinion didn't matter.
You're
not commenting on the prudence of the decision.
No, I'm saying that you're asking my personal opinion on a matter that is already.
Does that offer clarity?
No, it doesn't offer.
But listen,
it goes to compound the situation that Richard has divorced himself.
No, please.
As a Ghanaian, from
But I
the
was
requirement of accountability and responsibility.
If you exercise some
from
restraint, you can understand what we're saying.
Well,
please.
no, but
wait. I'll come to Richard.
No, let me listen, because this is serious.
Listen.
Otherwise,
No, but you've clarified.
no.
Let's clarify.
I need him to understand.
No,
Really.
but you're not addressing him. You're addressing your
Well,
audience.
but he's attributing something to me I don't accept.
But you have to clarify.
No, let me
that what you said you didn't matter.
Because you asked him whether or not he's satisfied, and he said,
but
you shouldn't have asked him if you thought it was important. You shouldn't have asked him.
I'm saying you've clarified.
Give me 1 minute. Just give me 1 minute.
Take it.
The structure is clear. That the decision to build or not to build belongs to the board of Bank of Ghana. Whether I'm a citizen who has an interest or not, I don't influence that decision at the time they're making it. Because we're all here when they make the decision and nobody was called. So they made a decision as a board and they are responsible for it. And so you ask me a question relative to a decision they have already made and they are in motion with that. And you're asking my personal opinion. I said, my personal opinion at this point would not matter. But allow me to comment on what they have done, which is to say that the bank from time immemorial had committed.
You've repeated that.
Yes, but it's important for him to understand what he's attributing. You should be able to moderate the program.
But that is why
not to attribute things to me.
That is why I came back to clarify, and you've clarified. Yes, a second. I'll come back to you. No, I'll come back. Hold on, Richard. That's why I came back to clarify. But remember, Richard, that you are here as the communications director of the MPP.
Right.
So when I said I'm going to ask you the ordinary man's question, which is 2021, you actually are telling us, because you were trying to say, oh, this was something that was historical, and they inherited it, that in 2021, at the height of COVID, at the height of the economic crisis that everybody was telling you you're going to go to, was it the prudent thing to invest 250 million? I was asking you as a spokesperson for your party. You're saying that was a prudent thing to do. That's the question.
I didn't say that.
But that was a question I was asking you.
Yeah, but
as a spokesperson for your party.
Right. So then I ask you to allow me to establish.
Let me rephrase my question then.
Okay. So you want to re-ask the question?
Yes, because it's important.
Yeah.
As the spokesperson for your party, you are saying to us that the party and yourself, because you speak for them, right, believe that it was a prudent thing to invest 250 million, budget for it, and actually start the project in 2021, height of COVID, beginning of the economic crisis.
If you want me to answer in hindsight, because the facts are before us now, and remember when I ended my statement, I posed the question, would we be talking about this today, but for the 53.1 billion? You remember I ended that way. So we are having a conversation in context outside of us. That's why I told you.
So you say in hindsight, your answer
in hindsight, that's a conversation we're having. In hindsight, it's proper to say that they should stop. But then the commitment has already been made. And remember your own question to him, to say that the commitment of building this had already started. You asked him that question.
Yes,
and then he now went to tell us about his credentials in project management. So you need to be able to situate the conversation that we are not making a judgment on the matter from where we stand, but I'm making an analysis for you that led the bank to commit to build that.
But importantly, you've said that in hindsight...
So I'm very disappointed by
it's okay. No, good. I mean, you've clarified. Don't go. You say, but importantly, you've said...
So we are speaking in context.
Importantly, you've said, in hindsight, they shouldn't have gone ahead with the project at the time they did, considering the economic...
I didn't say that. There's a critical question that I've asked you.
Yeah, no, but don't ask me a question. I'm asking the question.
But it doesn't mean that you have monopoly. No, it doesn't mean that you have monopoly.
No problem.
But I can ask you a question. Which question you all actually asking?
So you're saying that in hindsight,
Evans,
250 million in 2021 for a project like this, considering where we were, wasn't something you should have done.
He says that I have an interest as a citizen in Bank of Ghana.
Yes.
In fact, I have an interest in our democracy, and you are also equal interest. So I can ask you a question, you can ask me.
No problem. Let's move on.
So the point, I need to ask you a question that can really help you clarify your question. The point I want to ask you is that now we have a debt on Bank of Ghana's book now, about 53.1 billion. This building has been going on since 2001. Have you found reason to ask that question up until now? So it's a contextual issue that you understand that, yes, the project was relevant at the time they were doing it. Maybe now we need to re-examine the issues and say that going forward, we will not continue. Okay. I'm not under any illusion. I think we have an answer. So I am not under any illusion, before my senior come, that the Bank of Ghana board itself will be considering going forward, now that they just recorded this, to re-examine that.
Okay.
So that question belongs to all of us, but in hindsight, we cannot make the decision as though that this should have been seen in 2021.
Okay. But I'll come to some of the key reasons the Bank of Ghana itself said accounted for the challenge that they currently face. And Richard, if you read the Bank of Ghana's statement, there are a few lines in there that indict the government. For example, it says, as a result of sovereign spreads in Ghana, bonds widen, signaling investor dissatisfaction with the stance of fiscal policy. In other words, they're trying to tell you the problem was staring us in the face. And then it says, the budget for 2022, which was read in 2021, failed to address fiscal concerns as the budget was even more expansionary by about 23%, with a raft of revenue measures to raise financing. So again, by BoG is telling you, you knew the problem was coming, and yet you went ahead with a budget that was expansionary. And then it also talks about how it became very clear, I'm quoting, it became very clear that Ghana was on a path that was unsustainable and government had to approach the IMF. So the Bank of Ghana itself now is telling you that you failed them. And in failing them, you failed the economy.
Well, thank you very much. I read the same statement, and interestingly, my understanding of it is quite different.
Okay.
Now, the key thing is that in that statement, if you read, I think the Bank of Ghana contextualized that by saying that nobody can talk about a state that it's in without reference to the context in which it has to take those decisions. So if you read that statement, I think it started with that to understand where we are, you have to appreciate the context that led to those decisions and ultimately where we are. And so if you do a base assessment of where we are, which is actually even the reason we're talking about the building of a certain structure and we're saying that is it the right time or not the right time, because we're in a certain economic environment. This, I think it was yesterday, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who works with the RAND Corporation, which is a non-profit organization that does public policy and all that. Actually says that the war in Ukraine has impact on central banks across the world because it actually led them into making a lot of monetary policy mistakes, because you don't, the predictions as to how inflation was going to behave was very unstable. And so you saw that immediate monetary policy response to the inflation that was induced by the war there, and everything else that cascaded then immediately after the war. But for us, before the war, you saw the 2022 budget that was read in 2021 with revenue measures proposed, anticipating the difficulty, which is what the World Bank, the Bank of Ghana is indicating. So the government anticipated that and was putting measures in place to respond to the revenue expectations of 2022 to be able to mitigate that. But then we saw a protracted debate about that revenue measure in Parliament, such that government, even though the budget was approved, appropriations given, element of the budget that gives government the revenue to fund the budget was held. And up until May in 2022, that was not approved. Now, so if you're a government, then how then do you fund your operations with your revenue, essential revenue measure held in abeyance? So government has had to make certain decisions in 2022. Now, remember, in that same year was when the war happened. I always tell people that if you want to see the growth of this economy, look at after 2020. You saw in 2021, the economy grew. So as a government, you are planning forward, anticipating that things will turn around. From 2021, the last quarter of 2021, the economy grew by 6%. So it gives you a sense of momentum going into 2022. But everything that happened after that 2022 budget read, and the situation we had in Parliament, and the holding of that revenue measure, and eventually, which bastardized it to the extent that that measure still cannot raise any revenue to the tune forecasted, created a problem that you needed to solve. So then the question I ask people is that, imagine the NDC was in power. And that question they haven't answered is to say that if the NDC were in power and were faced with that situation, all the situations that I've just described, which you know very well, If they were faced with that situation, what would they do?
Okay, Stephen, let me bring
Okay,
him.
let me just conclude for you.
Just a second.
Okay, so if they were faced with that situation, what would they do? I think they should come and give us the answer. But then to be proactive, government took measures to ensure that the business of Ghana continued.
Okay.
In other words, you couldn't assume everything constant because you can't hold life, expecting that until that revenue measure comes, no expenditure.
Okay. Let me
government was faced with a situation and it responded to it, but the debt, even that. So finally, before even in that 2021, Bank of Ghana did not post a loss. Okay, in 2021, Bank of Ghana did not post a loss, even in spite of all of that. The laws we are discussing now are direct function of what we need to do.
I mean, but the borrowing was happening at the time.
But then they weren't posting a loss.
Yeah, but it was catching up. I mean, as they
no,
say,
but
it just caught up.
No,
just caught up.
They didn't post a loss.
Yeah, no, true. Okay. But it just caught up with you the next year.
No, but see, so that's why we need to locate.
Yeah, let me bring in. Let me bring in.
We can understand it properly.